Hello everybody. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of people who bring me a car do so because they love it, are proud of it, and would like to share that love with the rest of the world. However, every now and again, somebody brings their car with a rather bold claim attached. And such is the case for this, because he believes this to be the finest AMG model that Mercedes have ever produced. And in today's video, I'm going to be telling you why I think he might be onto something. So then, for those who don't speak Mercedes, what exactly is it we're driving today? This is what's known as a W203 generation C-Class, made from 2000 until around 2007. It was sold in various different guises, different body styles, and with different engines. But to us petrol heads, the one you're always going to be attracted to is the AMG. And for this generation, AMG were going through something of a transitional phase, because it began with the C32 AMG, powered by a 3.2-litre supercharged V6. Unlike its predecessor, the 202 generation AMG, badged the C43, which, as you might have imagined, had a 4.3-litre naturally aspirated V8. And that's a car that I think is desperately cool and a real rarity now. But midway through, for whatever reason, they decided that wasn't quite enough. So, when the model was facelifted between 2004 and 2005, depending on how you count it, the C32 was reborn as the C55, now complete with a naturally aspirated version of the 5.4-litre engine, as you would have seen in supercharged guys in the likes of the E55, SL55, so on and so forth. Here it makes 367 horsepower and 376 pounds-feet of torque. That's 510 Newton-meters. And putting that engine in this car was no easy task, because it would appear that when they came out with the 203, Mercedes never intended for this car to have a V8. And so, to accommodate it in the C55, they had to graft on the front end from the very similar CLK 55. That is a car that I have always lusted after, and as it happens, will be driving fairly soon. But for today, we have this, Michael's gorgeous C55 Wagon. A real rarity. In fact, compared to the later AMG, the next in line from this being the mighty and much loved W204 C63 with the 6.2-litre V8, these were built in tiny numbers. I think something like 8,000 full stop of the 55s. These wagons, they produced just 595 over a fairly short period, this one having been built in 2004 and registered in 2005. Now, from the inside, you wouldn't really know that you were in anything particularly special. You've got AMG gauges, and that's about it. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I think there's actually a lot to be said for this generation of Mercedes interior. In some ways, I think it actually feels a step up in quality over the later 204s. Though yes, you've still got plenty of plasticky buttons and the like. You've also got a little bit of leather here. These seats are beautiful, actually support you a bit more than you might think from looking at them. They've got electric adjustment and memory for the driver, and in this particular car, half electric, half manual, and no memory for the passenger. Overall interior space is okay. The car is just 4.6 meters long, with this estate being marginally bigger than the saloon. However, though the boot is a generous size and reasonably usefully shaped, the back seats are a little tight. You will still get 4 people in here, provided you aren't members of the Harlem Globetrotters. As you have probably noticed, this car is also left-hand drive on account of the fact that it, along with Michael, lives in Switzerland. He's an expat who's been over there for quite a while, and he's had this for nearly 4 years now, having always lusted after one, and his previous car being another member of the same generation of C-Class, but a C180 compressor, which is also a not bad car at all, but of course no AMG. It still feels relatively compact in its dimensions, meaning that even though I am on the wrong side of it and the roads are a little busy today, it's no drama to drive at all. It's really very pleasant. And I've got to say, I do think this wagon looks really, really good. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, when these came out, I would have just thought they're boring. They're taxis, basically, but this is lovely. Part of the reason I think that this car maybe struggled to sell is because at the time it was made, it had some of the stiffest competition you could ever imagine, chiefly in the form of the E46 BMW M3. And though I myself have never really been in love with that car for reasons discussed in many videos, it is a great looking thing, is generally well regarded as being the better handling thing, has also an excellent engine, but we'll get onto this one a little bit more very shortly, and BMW is often considered the driver's brand. I think it doesn't help that these came exclusively with a 5-speed Mercedes automatic. There was never a manual option for this car, whereas for the M3 you could have it either with a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed F1 style gearbox, what BMW called SMG. Likewise, over at Audi, at the exact time this was being made, you'd have got the S4 and then a little later on the RS4, also with just the manual, and in the case of the RS, a screaming 4.2 litre V8 that went to 8,000 RPM. Today, both of those are, rightly or wrongly, regarded as cult classics, and actually, my money would go on the Audi. But I gotta say, just a few weeks ago, I was walking through my supermarket car park, often a good place to go car spotting, and I saw what you'd consider a regular, ordinary facelift W203 C320. And I just stopped and looked at it and went, oh my word, that is such a good looking car. I mean, it's just perfectly proportioned, it's beautiful, and it even wears this silver really annoyingly well. Long-term viewers of the channel will know I have a real thing against silver cars, not because they look bad, but just because they are dull. However, it was just right. Muscular, beautifully proportioned, not overly large. And I thought, wow, I gotta one day get me one of those. And of course, the one I'd have to buy is a C55, so I'm very, very grateful to be driving this. And how is it? Well, at low speeds, I've got to say it's a little choppier than I would expect, although the combination of nice, big, generously torquey V8 with 5-speed torque converter automatic is a very good one. This gearbox and engine are better behaved and more comfortable than many far more modern and technically superior solutions. Turbos and dual clutches, yeah, they make good numbers, but honestly, when it comes to actual refinement, you know, the stuff that luxury cars should have, they don't tend to do all that well. And this is one reason for me that AMG began to fall apart when they introduced the likes of the A45. And let's not talk about the C63 hybrid, shall we? And I also happen to think it was an inspired decision on Michael's part to fit the car with these 17-inch alloys in place of the original factory fit 18s. They are wearing marginally wider rubber at the back. From factory, this would have had 245s. Now it's got 255s. The fronts are 225s, or if you want, 235s. But it does make it ride just a little better, and even so, it's not what you'd call cosseting. It's not crashy, it is just firmer than I sort of expected it to be. And I think that's largely because when you talk about a Mercedes, you do expect it to be a nice, comfortable, wafty car. I guess the counter to that would be that this is a C-Class AMG, and so was always designed to be the sportiest of them all. No doubt partly thanks to those relatively small wheels with fairly generous profile tyres compared to many modern things, and the fact they're also, again, relatively narrow by today's standards. The road noise is not that bad at all. This is a genuinely very pleasant thing to just potter about in. It doesn't like the odd lump, bump, ridge and cat's eye in the middle of the road when you do hit it, but you know what? It's not horrid, and I'm sure something that if you were dedicated, you could fix. I think I might have to. Visibility is very good. Great view out the front. You've got the classic Mercedes emblem at the end of the bonnet, meaning you can work out exactly where that is. To the side and the back, you can also see just about anything and everything that you'd want, and I'm also happy to say the car also has both climate control and a sunroof. Mercedes has always been the vanguard of the sunroof, and I'm very, very grateful for that. It means that on a day like today you can choose between having a nice chilly cabin or just a little bit of wind in the hair. I like that. The car is even capable of doing pretty decent MPG. In fact, on a run, it will return over 30 to the gallon, which is very good when you consider it is a near 5.5 litre V8 pulling a car that likely weighs about 1 3/4 tons. And there is a good chance that's down to the fact that this M113 lump was designed by Mercedes at a time when they were trying to deal with ever-tightening emissions regulations, and so came up with this 3-valve per cylinder design. 2 intake, 1 exhaust, which had 2 upsides. First off, it made them a little more efficient, but secondly, it also gave them a nice big spread of torque. And I think it's a great engine. They also happen to be very reliable, particularly when compared with either the older supercharged lump or the later 6.2. So on paper then, it's all looking fairly good, but when it comes to it and you find yourself on a glorious bit of B road, how does the C55 perform? And if that noise has you running towards the classifieds in search of your perfect AMG, don't forget to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that will cross-reference a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including previous accident damage, potential mileage discrepancies, usage as a taxi, or involvement in either a fire or a theft. Best of all, for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JayEmm. And now, back to the action. Well, I'm sure it won't surprise you to hear, but E46 M3 or RS4, it is not. What it is, though, is a very distinct character all of its own. So, let's go through all of its many quirks and features, shall we? And let's begin with that engine. It's glorious. Doesn't have that savage run for the red line that the BMW does, but it's certainly got a lot more torque than the Audi at low RPM. The BMW's always felt supernaturally potent considering its size and numbers. I also think this makes an absolutely cracking noise. From in here you can hear it, though it's not particularly dominant, but from outside it makes exactly the right amount and quality of sound. It's a cultured, refined noise, not the angry snarl of some of the later products. It also means that whichever of the 5 ratios the gearbox is in, you've got something in terms of response. I like it a lot. The throttle pedal doesn't feel pin sharp, but it still does more than enough, and I think part of that delay might simply be the gearbox torque converter locking up. The brake pedal then, nice, well servoed, and these performance-packed brakes do a good job of bringing the car to a halt. I also think they look pretty good too. Michael was asking me what I think of the bronze look he's gone for, and comment down below and tell me what you think, but I think it's cracking. The only other options of note on this car are the fitment of larger exhaust tips, but the exhaust itself is standard, and the AMG limited slip differential, which has a 30% lock. Although today, with the conditions as good as they are, I really don't think I'm going to be putting that to the test. Steering then, well, it's certainly, I think, a little bit better and maybe more communicative than the E46 M3s. A little more natural, it's nicer off center. It's got a little bit of weighting and texture and feel to it, but not masses. It works, it suits the character of the car, but it's not what you'd call amazing steering. Turning circle is much the same. It's good, not great. Grip, yeah, decent. Full beans in first. Car's got no trouble whatsoever putting the power down today. It's reasonably agile. You feel just a little bit of body roll, but it's actually quite well controlled, and you use it simply just to judge how much you're asking of the car. But its abilities, well, they're more than good enough, I think. So then, time to talk about the bit of this car that I know you're all convinced is letting it down, and you're kind of right, the gearbox. It's a 5-speed Mercedes automatic. They dubbed it the AMG Shift or something silly like that, but the fact is it is still at its heart the same 5-speed Merc box that had a very, very long life, because they were still using it nearly 10 years later for the likes of the CL65, on account of the fact that it is hard as nails, this thing. It's nearly impossible to break. And the truth is, with this gearbox, you can use it in manual mode, for which there are little buttons behind the wheel, or you can even wiggle the lever down here, but it's actually best left to its own devices, for which it's got either comfort or sport modes. I'm in sport now, and even so it doesn't rev too high. However, put your foot down, it will drop a cog, or where need be too. And because the engine has so much torque, well, it just makes sense. This is a really, really good 7/10 car. Try and push it harder, and I think it will come undone. It also just doesn't rush to the red line like some of those other cars do, but that's fine. It's still more than capable enough. Not maybe quite as quick as you think. Certainly feels a little slower from this seat than it did from that earlier, but it's got ample performance for this kind of road. And actually, the engine and the chassis, they feel fairly well matched for each other. You make a few more corrections and things than you think you really ought to, but you can carry the national speed limit. I'm doing 60 right now, very well. Every now and again the car feels just a little touch unsettled. It does feel a touch unrefined. Yeah, there, just understeered a little bit. The whole thing sort of started to get away from itself. It felt like the tyres there maybe were just letting it down a little bit, but it is really talkative. Yeah, it's that little sideways shimmy move a touch. Very curious. Let's push a little hard around this next bend. I'm going to pop it into manual mode. Just going to provoke it a tad here. Let's just try. I mean, I think I'll struggle, to be fair, given the... Oh, yeah, those downshifts are not particularly sophisticated, it has to be said. Right, chuck this around a bend. Are we clear? Yeah. Yeah, you can feel that diff sort of doing its thing. There is traction control, and I have left it on, and that's absolutely fine by me. But yeah, now you start to press on, you feel the limits of that chassis. And this leaves me in a bit of a quandary, because this is a very enjoyable car, but it is stuck between two worlds. You see, I'm told because it's got a shorter final drive than, say, the E55, on the motorway, 70 mile an hour, you're doing 2,500 RPM, which is fine. But if you live abroad and you drive through Germany and you can cruise at higher speeds, it does rev quite high, it does drink a lot more fuel, and it just doesn't feel particularly comfortable. Then, oh yeah, that few bends here, you got undulations as you go around. It was not a massively happy bunny there. And because it then also doesn't have the manual box and everything else, people have swapped them by putting the C320's manual in here. And yeah, I'd be tempted to do that, but I think, you know what? It just suits the character of the car more by being an auto. And I think actually the route to take with this, it isn't to put a manual and everything in it and do all that sort of stuff, tempted though I might be. It's instead to sort that suspension out. That, I think, is where the car needs the most help, because as it is, the car struggles a little bit on more demanding sections. However, really, maybe the best thing to do is just to not worry about that. Just enjoy it for what it is, and think of it as a C-Class, but with a big engine. But the best part is that unlike, say, that BMW, where the prices are continuing to rise as the legend grows, these are still a little bit of a hidden gem. And so today on Auto Trader, a car like this was up for sale at just £7,500, for which, honestly, you wouldn't want to buy an M3 like that. And this one also might not look like it. This has got 260,000 kilometers on the clock. That's 160,000 miles. And had you told me it had a fraction of that, I'd have believed you. The interior is in excellent condition. The exterior is very, very good. There's not even much of the corrosion, which certainly did plague Mercs of this era. And even better, they are, generally speaking, fairly mechanically simple. They are reasonably easy cars to keep going. If you want yourself an affordable but enjoyable AMG, this is that. Just don't expect a sports car out of it. As an interesting daily driver though, either for somebody that needs one car that does everything, you know, dog wagon, train car, weekend warrior, and occasional bit of fun on a back road, yeah, the latter, it's not its speciality, but the rest, it'll do fairly well. Or if you are somebody that's already lucky enough to have a stable of other decent cars and you want something that again is interesting but going to be a third or fourth car, well, this would definitely tick all the boxes for me. Is it the bestest AMG ever made? Well, I'm not sure about that. The later W204s, the facelift in particular, they are an absolute riot to drive, and they kicked things up a gear. But they also did so in terms of running costs and with some of the reliability issues and everything else. They're also a lot showier, more in your face, and they do come with a few issues because of that. This, for an old school Merc fan, I think is likely to be far more appealing. So, there we go. That is the Mercedes-Benz C55 Estate. It's a good car. Anyway, I would like to say a big thank you to Michael for bringing it out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.